Test. Test, 1, 2.
All right. If everybody could go ahead and grab a seat, we're going to get started here in just a minute. Grace, maybe you could shut those doors. There are a couple more seats here in the middle, if any of you guys want to come forward. I'm going to raise your hand if you have a seat open next to you. There's all kinds of people standing in the back. All you standing in the back, there's still more chairs up here if any of you want to come up forward. Thank you. We put on a lot of events, and I've tried to figure out some kind of a trick for getting people to sit in the front. In my class at UT, the first week of class, I hand out $100 bills to everybody that sits in the front row. The rest of the semester, everybody has their hopes up. But awesome. Well, great. I think we'll get started. Welcome, everyone. My name's Josh Baer, and I'm the founder and CEO of... No clapping necessary for me, thank you. You'll hold that. We've got some good clapping coming up. But I'm Josh Baer. I'm the founder and CEO here at Capital Factory, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here for the kickoff of Austin Startup Week, and in particular for welcoming Army Futures Command here. So thanks for coming. What a week this has been. This is the 8th Austin Startup Week, and we do it once a year. So we've been doing it for 8 years. That almost doesn't feel like a startup anymore. You know, we're getting kind of mature. And it's really kind of hard to believe how big it's come. I definitely want to give a big thank you to my co-organizer, Jacqueline Hughes. I know she's here. Where's Jacqueline? Jacqueline. So Jacqueline has been doing this with me for a long time. Also, the whole Capital Factory Dream Team staff, they're a big part of this, as well as track leads from most of the other great startups and entrepreneurial organizations in town who all took a piece of owning different parts of Startup Week. So there's different tracks happening every day. And it's really just, I know it's the biggest and the best Startup Week ever. And so we couldn't have done it without everybody's help. So thank you to everyone. This weekend started with the first Army Futures Command event in Austin, which was a hackathon called A Hack of the Drones, like Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. And this place was packed. This room was packed. The 5th floor was packed. There were people upstairs from Friday afternoon all the way through Sunday yesterday with people here hacking and working on projects. And they came from all over Texas. They came from all over the country to be part of this. It was really an incredible event. Probably my highlight was watching actually one of my former students from UT, Longhorn, doing this drone racing. He had a drone that went like 90 miles an hour, and he was flying it in VR. Like he had VR goggles on. I would have definitely vomited if I had tried that. But it was pretty awesome. It was pretty amazing to see. And there was a lot of other great tech and things that came out of it. And the goal of it really was to figure out how they could, how all of us could help deal with all these small, cheap drones that are coming in that are used for consumers in a lot of ways, but also are becoming a big security threat if one of those little drones tries to fly over the White House or the Pentagon or lots of other places. So today, then, we actually just before this, for those of you who may have been in the room, wrapped up the 2nd annual Women in Tech Summit and had almost 1,000 RSVPs. This place was packed all day, and when I was in this room, I was one of probably 3 or 4 guys. And as you can see in this room now, it's usually kind of the opposite for a lot of the tech industry. So it's always refreshing to get a little view of what it looks like from the other side. And it was really inspiring to see so many incredible leaders get up here and talk about some of the different challenges they face and the opportunities they have for improving things. And I think some real progress was made today, and I know we're going to see more come out of that. A big shout out goes to Savannah Barker, who's our new diversity and inclusion coordinator here, and this was her big event, and she'll be working all year round on helping to bring in all kinds of different people into our community and make sure that everybody feels welcome here. So we're really happy about that too. So now it's the main event, and it's going to be my pleasure in a few minutes to welcome to Austin General Murray, who's here to my right, and all of the Army Futures Command, who I've had the pleasure of getting to know over the past few weeks and months. So before I do that, let me get a sense of who's here. So who here is at Capital Factory for the first time? Some of you? Awesome. A lot of you have been here before. That's great. Well, for those of you that are here, welcome. We're known as the center of gravity for entrepreneurship and startups here in Texas. And more so, Austin and Capital Factory are becoming a center of gravity for defense innovation, for helping our country to make them use technology to help protect all the men and women who serve our country. And that started when Joseph Kopser and Craig Cummings, who's up here in the front, came here to Austin with their startup Ride Scout, which was an innovative transportation solution. And not only did they bring all their military connections and military friends here, which were constantly coming for different visits, but they eventually sold that business to Mercedes and brought Daimler here. And then they now have invested in our startup community and have a great presence here. And I don't know if we have any in the room here now, but I know there's a whole bunch of Daimler executives here for Startup Week this week as well. Then, 2 years ago, Secretary of Defense Ash Carter launched the Austin Defense Innovation Unit here. And that was the first official military presence here at Capital Factory. And where's Zach? I know I saw Zach around here. Zach Walker heads up that now, along with, she's now at Dell, but Christy Abizade, who is here at the Women's Summit today, who helped set that up too. And that was the first kind of flag in the ground to get the government here at Capital Factory interfacing with startups. Then just a few months ago, the Secretary of the Air Force, Heather Wilson, launched the AFWERX unit here, which you'll see right around the corner to our right. There's a roll-up garage door with a whole bunch of airplanes painted on it. And any day that you walk by here, you'll see airmen in there thinking about how they can use technology and innovation to train pilots faster, to make them safer, and help our country. And now it seems like every week there's another government innovation unit coming here, thinking about how they can plug into this community and be part of it and learn from the other groups that are here as well. And pretty much every day, there are men and women in uniform coming through here, getting a tour, participating in some event, up here on this stage. Last week, for the first time, this room was full of everybody in a uniform, and I'd never seen that before. It was really pretty awesome. And this is making a real impact for startups here. It's made an impact for Sensei, startup that many of you have probably seen here before. They just use Sensei's technology, which literally reads your mind, to train the first class of fighter pilots here in Austin and at our airport, at Austin Bergstrom. And they did it in less than half the time that it normally takes using this technology combined with virtual reality to really understand how people learn and to customize the training just for them. It's also an opportunity for companies like New Knowledge, who's using artificial intelligence to identify which social media messages are legitimate, are real fake news, and are being created and promoted by malicious bots or people that are trying to influence you. They don't figure out if the headline's right. They can actually just tell that this is fake because there's all these automated computers trying to promote it and push it. This is a big problem for companies and a big problem for governments, and it's only something that we're going to see get bigger. And it's also attracted new companies into our community that we might not have met before without this military presence being here. Companies like Aptronic, who has built a full robotic exoskeleton, like Iron Man style. And this lets soldiers carry heavy weights for long distances and perform literally superhuman tasks. And we see all kinds of interesting companies here, but we weren't seeing robotic exoskeletons as much before all this started happening. So Army Futures Command being in Austin is orders of magnitude larger in scale than DIU and AFWorks. We're really excited to have them here, but it's important to understand how big of a deal this is and why it's different. This is the creation of a new 4-star command, of which there were only 3 other 4-star commands in the Army. And will mean 500 people based here at an Army base in the middle of downtown Austin. I don't think there are any other Army bases in the middle of downtown anywheres. This group controls the entire R&D budget of the U.S. Army. Maybe they'll correct me. That's how I say it. One of the biggest R&D budgets in the world. And they can invest money to help bring something to life, but they don't take any equity. It's kind of awesome for the startups here. They just pay you to build something, and then they pay you to use it. And then you own it. It really doesn't get any better than that. And it's not just one program. It's not like one thing. This is going to be many, many things over a long time, over decades. And while it's centered here in Austin, of course, it's not just happening here in Austin. It's happening all over the country. But the headquarters is here. And General Murray, while he probably still spend a lot of time in Washington, he's going to be spending a lot of time here, along with many of the other people making the decisions about this. So Austin showed up big time in order to make this happen. There was an intense interview process, similar to what you see happening in the press now with the Amazon HQ2 search. It involved multiple visits with little or short notice. It's like I get an email like, they're coming tomorrow, clear your schedule, and go make a presentation. I personally, it was this summer, I missed 2 weeks of family vacation with my family, and I know a lot of other people here made big sacrifices to be able to pull all this together and respond to the things they needed. But now, with all this coming together, it really feels like it's worth it. The Austin Chamber is the one who takes point on these kinds of things. When they happen, they get to kind of coordinate everybody. And honestly, what I've learned through this process is they really don't get much credit for it. Almost everything they do is behind the scenes and under NDA. And I didn't know that people at the Chamber pull all-nighters. But they were pulling all-nighters to make this happen on a regular basis. Governor Abbott was also critical in bringing this to fruition. He made time to meet with the Undersecretary McCarthy and General Wesley as they were doing the interviews, and really made some other magic happen to make this possible. Part of that being a $2 million, I'm going to use the wrong word for it, but $2 million that was being able to be allocated to help bring Army Futures Command here that they announced last week. And then UT System and their Board of Regents also played a critical role in figuring out a solution that got the Army the space that they needed, which is about 2 blocks away from us at 7th and Lavaca in this beautiful new UT System building, of which they also got the top floor there too. And I'm excited to announce, I don't even know if I'm allowed to announce this, that just this weekend, we got our finalized contract with Army Futures Command so that they'll be joining DIU and AFWorks here at Capital Factory. So we're really excited about that as well. And so this truly was an all-hands effort across the city of Austin and the state of Texas, and I'm just so happy to see how it turned out, and we're so happy to have Army Futures Command here. So before I introduce General Murray, has anybody here been to one? We do every month we do a talk. It's called the Intro to the Austin Startup Scene. Has anybody been to one of those talks? Some of you? In that talk, I give that talk every month. It's probably one of the longest kind of meetups or events I've been doing. I've been doing it for probably as long as we've had Capital Factory. And in that talk, I always talk about the beginning of the tech ecosystem, what made Austin a tech city. And I point out, as I've learned, I wasn't here at that time, that everybody I talk to, you pretty much get one common consensus. It points back to one thing, which was MCC, the Microelectronics and Computer Technology Corporation, also with Semitech, which came here in the 80s. And that seems to be this inflection point, this time when suddenly everything changed and Austin really got on the map. And I really believe from everything that I've learned about Army Futures Command that 20 or 30 years from now, we're going to look back on this summer and on this week as another one of those inflection points and see how Army Futures Command has changed Austin in a similar way. So this is General Murray's first time speaking at Capital Factory, and I want to make sure he knows how glad we are that he's here. So when I invite him up here in a second, I'd like to ask all of you to really show him our appreciation, and hopefully all of you will stand up and give him a big round of applause. General Mike Murray is a career infantry officer who's led soldiers at every level, including command of the famed 3rd Infantry Division. He commanded forces fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq. He's also spent many years here in Texas at Fort Hood, where he claims to have perfected his own technique for smoking brisket. Where is it? Losing my papers. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce General Mike Murray of the Army Futures Command.
Please, thank you. And I'm going to apologize up front because I've had a head cold for the last couple of days, so I'm going to hang on to a bottle of water. And when I got here, Josh said, you got 2 minutes. And I was trying to figure out why I only get 2 minutes. Now I know, because Josh talked the first 25 minutes. And I know what's most important to you is your questions, so I'm gonna be fairly quick, but I'm not going to be terribly quick. And then we'll preserve some time. I think Josh is going to bring a couple chairs up, and he's got a couple canned questions that we're going to get to. And then I actually have nothing to do until 6:30 tomorrow morning, so I'm happy to stick around and take your questions. So we're happy to sponsor this event. We are happy to participate as not necessarily a co-sponsor, but really a no-cost co-sponsor of yesterday's event that Josh mentioned. This is my very first startup week or startup event period. Yesterday was my very first hackathon or hack of the drones, and so I was fascinated yesterday, and I'm fascinated today to see what comes out of this because this is, as you would imagine, completely different than anything I've done for the last 36 years. And so we're happy to be part of this. Just the fact that I'm standing on this stage and it was my first hackathon yesterday should tell you that the Army is interested in doing things different than we've done it for the last really 246 years. And really differently than we've done it since about the 1950s, which is the way we acquire things today is still based upon the way we did it in the 1950s. And that's really the problem we're trying to get after, is a different way of acquiring things. And I would just start off by saying, and it's not all about things. Ultimately, when the organization is completely formed, as Josh mentioned, about 500 or so here in Austin, and about 12,000 spread out through the rest of the country. And one of those places is Fort Eustis, Virginia, in Southern Virginia, which we're going to end up calling the Futures and Concepts Directorate. So it's really about concepts of how the Army will fight in the future, and it's really not just the Army. It's always has been and always will be a joint fight fight with the Air Force, the Marine Corps, the Navy, et cetera. And really the organizational structure, how we'll have to change our organizational structure. All that will result in what I would call gaps and opportunities. And those gaps and opportunities is what we are really focused on solving with this piece of the command and the piece of the command that's in Maryland is how do we field innovative technologies, or how do we augment what we're already doing with innovative technologies to really deliver the one and only thing that I'm focused on, and that is provide the very best capabilities to the soldiers that will be in the force, not only today, but in 20, 25 years from now. And one of my favorite stories is, I can't hold on to two things at once. One of my favorite stories is up at Fort Hood, Texas right now, I've got two granddaughters. One's 4 and one's 3. And so 25 years from now, when my 3-year-old granddaughter is an airborne infantry ranger company commander someplace, and she will be. That's my personal involvement. I want her to have the very best equipment and her soldiers to have the very best equipment that this nation can provide. And this nation has a long history of providing amazing capabilities to our soldiers. And I want to guarantee you, after spending 36 years with them, America's best is wearing a uniform, and it's all 4 services uniform. And they deserve the very best equipment we can provide them, the very best capabilities we can provide them. And that's really the genesis of Army Futures Command, because we took a survey about 6 months ago of everybody involved in the force modernization, the modernization of the United States Army. And one of the survey questions was, will the current way we do things deliver the results that we're after, that result I just described? 100% of the respondents, and it was a fairly large sample, said no. It will not deliver the capabilities that we know we need to deliver. The very next question was, is your organization responsible for that? 98% of the people said no, it's somebody else. So in many ways, when you look at Army, how we acquire things, all the way from a good idea to when we eventually divested that equipment, it was very stovepiped. So there was somebody responsible for the generation of requirements, and there was somebody responsible for the actual building of the material, and there's somebody else responsible for the S&T and the RDE that went into that material. And really the only place it ever got integrated was at big Army level with the chief and the secretary, and the chief and the secretary got 100,000 things on their mind besides doing that type of work. So that was the genesis of establishing what the chief is very fond of saying, unity of command, unity of effort, and really I would say unity of purpose, focused on that purpose we just talked about. And so that's what the headquarters has been stood up to do. We've got probably about another 6 or 8 months before we're fully operational. That does not mean we don't intend to accomplish some things between now and then. We're working with Josh and some technologies that we've seen. He mentioned one of them here in the Capitol factory. And so the question I always get is, so, I mean, how do you integrate some of the technologies and some of the capabilities we're seeing right now? There's several ways. One is that we see it, we like it, we buy it. Or we pay you to buy it and field that capability as quickly as we can. There's several of those that we're looking at. Another way is, I mean, you look at the Army 6 modernization priorities. Let's take number 1, long-range precision fires. I don't think I'm going to see, you know, a cannon that shoots 1,000 miles in this week in terms of a startup. But there are technologies that enable that. So the communications backbone, the machine learning that would have to go into that, some of the artificial intelligence that could be incorporated into that system and make it better. Because one of the things that's clear as you look towards the future is the flow of information is just going to get faster and more dense as this goes. And so cognitive aid for decision making for commanders. So although you might not look at the 6 Army modernization priorities and say, that's my thing, the technologies that will assist in that and really aid in the development of those systems is really what we're kind of focused on. And really the thing that I want to get out of this is you are going to expose us to things we would never ever see in one of our labs or one of our engineering centers because we just are not trained to think like this. We have a very risk-adverse system, and that's been built up over time. So in the 1950s when Robert McNamara created the way we acquire equipment, every time somebody made a mistake between the 1950s and now, somebody got punished and another regulation or rule got put on top of it. Congress has been pretty good the last 4 years in terms of loosening and giving us some additional authorities that should help speed this up. But one of my biggest concerns and where I really want your feedback is how can we help you be successful? Because if I leave you alone in the federal acquisition regulation system, you're going to have, I'll just guarantee you, you're going to have an extremely difficult time surviving in that. So we're looking for ways to help people not familiar with how that gets done, because I can't change the FAR, I can't change the DoD 5000, and we're looking at people like DIU and AFWorks to help us learn the lessons they've already learned, so we're not relearning them. But how do we help you through that process if you're one of the things we're interested in investing in? How do we help you get your technology matured? And Jay Harrison will talk about some of this. Jay is my point man here in the Capital Factory. How do we accelerate a capability? How do we help you get through the acquisition process that is the reality of DoD? How do we invest in some promising startups? How do we get you, if necessary, time in our fixed infrastructure? Could we have fixed infrastructure all over this country that's available for use? Range time, lab time, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the kind of things we're looking at, how we can help you, because really, we're looking for you to help us find different solutions, different ways of looking at problems, different solutions as you look at those problems, and help us, what I said up front, deliver that capability to our soldiers as quickly as we possibly can. Okay? Okay.
All right. So you can I can tell you've as I know you have had to explain this a bunch of times before, because it's getting pretty tight. You've already answered half my questions. So I'll do my best, and then of course we'll get to open it up to all you, which is probably the most interesting part anyway. But first of all, thank you for your service again, and welcome to Austin. We really appreciate you being here, and we're really excited about it. So, important question first. Other than your own, what is your favorite barbecue in Austin? Franklin's, Rudy's, Cooper's, Salt Lake. Do you have one yet?
I've only been to Rudy's, but
that is my favorite.
Yeah,
there you go. We'll take it.
That's the only place I've been so far.
That is my favorite. Many vote for Franklin's. Everyone has their pick, but now you've heard it officially.
But I'm open to trying all of them.
It's a good goal. That's a good goal.
So an hour and a half in my smoker per pound, and my rub's a secret.
All right. Well, I'll look forward to the invitation. All right, so let's jump in.
And I learned how to say all y'all.
All y'all. Oh, that's real. You're a real Texan now. All right. So, so as we said, this is the biggest reorganization of the Army in the past 45 years, and you talked about the old way of acquiring technology. Can you go into a little bit more of just like what is the old way?
And I apologize. So I should have thanked Austin for the warm welcome. Not only me personally, but really we've gotten since we got here. This is the first time I've been in uniform, I think, in about 2 weeks, and it's nice to have somebody ask me to be in uniform, so I think that's actually a positive sign.
Last time I saw you had a UT polo on. It was pretty solid.
I did.
Yeah.
And I got to remain impartial, so I got an A&M polo, too.
Yeah, that's right.
all depends on where I am.
I play that game, too.
So it's been built over many, many years, and so, one of the things that I think is probably one of the biggest faults we got is there's no prioritization of a requirement. So we have what's called combat developers at what's called centers of excellence all over the country. There's probably about 9 or 10 of them, and basically in a very and one of them, let's just call it the Fires, combat developers down at the Fires Center of Excellence, which deals with not only artillery, which is both cannon and rocket artillery, but also air defense. And I'm trying to talk in non-Army terms.
You're doing okay.
Okay. It's hard to come up with another word for artillery. Sorry. So they would determine, based in a very stovepipe way, what they thought the requirements were for the future of those capabilities. And there were 8 or 9 places around the country that would do it in the same thing. It would flow up to a place in Southern Virginia that was supposed to kind of rack and stack those requirements against what was a capability, against the Army's biggest capability gaps. And unfortunately, that was based upon really not a specific problem we were trying to solve. So we are refocusing the entire enterprise against a single problem to identify those gaps and opportunities I talked about. And it includes concepts, it includes organizational structure, run it through some very sophisticated modeling and simulation to find out what the very best solutions in terms of a requirement, not necessarily a piece of equipment, but a requirement that has to be filled. And then I will prioritize the work in terms of the requirements community. That used to take 6 months ago, 3 to 5 years to complete. And everybody's vote counted. So we still have the UN the General Council going, but we also have established a Security Council. So it was filled with thousands of people that could say no and a couple of people that could say yes. And so we've eliminated most of the people that can say no, and I'm one of the few people, and there's others that can say yes. So we've already proven that part of it. So we went from 3 to 5 years. We're working some capabilities right now, which are pretty amazing. That requirements document done was in 3 weeks. So we went from 3 to 5 years to 3 weeks. And that's the biggest thing I can do within the authorities I have. From that point, it got approved by senior Army leadership, it got funded, and it got passed to a program manager to develop that capability. And that's probably the biggest problem I'm still going to have, because although I have oversight and responsibility across the entire enterprise, I have authorities up to that point. So when a material decision is made by law, the Army Acquisition Executive takes over to develop that capability and field it. But that's Dr. Jetty is partnered with me, Paul Ostrowski, which has been down here several times. He's partnered with me to try to reduce that time as well. A lot of that was testing, and a lot of that was prioritization of time on a test range. So I have been given authority to prioritize test assets, test time, and range schedules to try to shorten that. So a lot of this is just thinning out, and making as much as possible simultaneous events as opposed to sequential.
So another thing I heard is a big theme over the past couple months has been about culture change. And that was part of putting an Army base in the middle of downtown Austin and embedding in accelerators like Capital Factory, and we know lots of other places as well. Can you talk to us about culture change? How do you change the culture of the Army? Slowly,
and I'm not sure. I've been asked that before. I'm not after changing the culture of the Army. And I really think, so those of you familiar with the Army, I think there's a lot of goodness to Army culture. So I'll never leave a fallen comrade as part of our culture. The seven Army values of loyalty, respect, self-service, honor, integrity, personal courage. All that is good. And I don't think you'd go to Fort Hood or Fort Bragg or over to Fort Bliss in El Paso. Nobody would say the Army has a culture problem. I think it's actually pretty strong. It really doesn't fall apart until you get into the type of area that I'm talking about. So I know that I've got my work cut out for me. I know that you change a culture or a piece of a culture very, very slowly. And I think it's focused around what I talked about up front, that no one part of this organization, whether I own it or not, will be successful in what we're trying to do. And it's not a relay race, which it has been in the past. It's a football team trying to move the football down the field, and you will never be successful if you don't have a line, you don't have a backfield, you don't have receivers, you don't have a quarterback, and really getting people focused on the outcome and not necessarily the process, because there is safety in the process, and it's also a very risk-averse culture. So focusing the organization on output and a common output across the organization it will take time. It will take constant messaging each and every day for the next 3 or 4 years to get that done, and some wins.
Well, thanks for pointing out that distinction, because I think that is a really important distinction. The context that I had heard it in was really in the context of the innovation culture, and I think that was a really good point, that it's not about, there's a lot of other great things that obviously we don't want to lose. So another phrase I heard a lot over the past couple months has been dual use. And that was typically projected towards the idea of using commercial technology, things developed for the commercial industry, and being able to bring them into the military. Why is that an important concept? How's that different than maybe what's more common today?
Because DOD are terrible customers, and I realize that 100%, that if I ask somebody to develop something strictly for the DOD market, it's probably not going to move as fast as it needs to move, and it's probably not going to have the market that you're after. So I'm perfectly okay with, an 80% market share being on the commercial side, as long as we get, the ability to also use that capability, because I think that brings people to the table that would otherwise not be interested.
So maybe if you don't already think of yourself as a defense contractor, there are ways that you could contribute to the mission and also get revenue and maybe new capabilities.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what everybody in this room to do, right?
Yeah. So I've heard about, we've heard the 6 modernization priorities, and I've heard about a couple interesting projects. I'm curious. The one I've heard about, I don't know if you can, even if I don't have any clearance, so if I heard about it, I guess this is okay. Maybe.
I'll let you know when the MPs show up.
Right. Yeah. I've already gotten my hand slapped by Army lawyers before, so yeah. But the coolest thing I've heard about are the glasses, the AR glasses. Can you talk about that at all? What you guys are working on with that?
Most everybody's seen the movies where the night vision goggles, really, either the monocular or the binocular version. And it's very green and fuzzy, and they're actually pretty good capability. But working with the gaming industry, we're on the path to really, in the next couple years, field that capability in a pair of Oakley sunglasses. And it's fused IR digital display. And it's a heads-up display, basically, plus the night vision capability. It also has, if we're successful, the capability to port into a very small computer, for lack of a better term, weapon sight, so a soldier no longer has to bring a weapon up and look through it. You can actually see it through there. It has the ability to show where everybody around you is located. It has the ability to put amazing waypoints as you're navigating, so you go from point A to point B just like your GPS does today.
See a path on the ground where you're supposed to go.
And probably most impressive is they're working very close. That's the Soldier Lethality Task Force working with that at OSD level, and then our Soldier Lethality cross-functional team at the Army, working with the Synthetic Training Environment cross-functional team. The ability, because one of the things that we want to do is just like you go to the Longhorns, right? So they go through practices every week. They go through 100 reps before they play the first down on a Saturday. Give soldiers the same abilities. So using the same glasses that they would take with them if they deployed to pipe in training scenarios, so they get hundreds of repetitions before they have to do it for the first time. And that's been displayed. Right now, we're not down to the Oakley-sized glasses yet. It's more of a typical VR-type goggles. But within the next 2 years, there's a clear path to get it to a pair of Oakley sunglasses.
So you talked earlier about the 6 modernization priorities and long-range precision fires and how we might not see that as our opportunity. Soldier lethality, I hear that, and I'm not necessarily thinking about how my software solution would be part of that, but augmented reality glasses I get, right? Like that fits in with a lot of things happening here. Another opportunity I think is around health. And one of the things I recently learned is that healthcare solutions, that you are not, if I'm incorrect about this, but that you're not bound by FDA approval. So you can actually deploy and try out different health solutions that don't necessarily have to go through the same process that other, that a consumer product would. And that seemed really interesting to me as a way for healthcare solutions that are trying to get in the market, because they need to actually get real feedback and see it really moving. So that seems like a big opportunity as well. And I know another startup here in Austin, Sempulse, which won the Mass Challenge competition recently, won one of the most recent Mass Challenge rounds, is another one of those examples where it's something that would normally require a much longer process, but maybe there's a shorter path working with you guys. So before we open up to everybody else for questions, is there one message that you want to make sure if there's one kind of thing that they would remember or to think about how they would engage with the Army Futures Command or could take away from this? Is there one really important thing you want to leave them with?
So I think, I mentioned the Army Applications Lab, and I don't know if you mentioned my name. So we'll be here in Capital Factory, so I think that's a great way to start. And like I said up front, I just like everybody kind of take away, what we're after. Most people, this is really about, people get turned off by war, I understand that completely, but this is really about preventing war, right? So, you know, the one way I think, to guarantee that the United States will fight another major war in the future is to show weakness, because people will take advantage of that. So this is about showing strength, and it's all about deterrence. It's all about preventing, not necessarily fighting. And if that day ever comes, and God forbid it doesn't, our soldiers deserve to be equipped with the best equipment they can be equipped with. We won't get there by ourselves. We need partnerships that we have not had in the past. And that's what this is all about. Not only here in the Capitol Factory, not only here at the University of Texas, not only here in Austin, but we really get outreach across the country to make sure that, you know, if that day ever comes, that a majority of our soldiers come home to their kids, to their families, and are successful in a future battlefield. General Milley said this many times. I mean, yeah, wars are expensive, and the worst thing is having to fight a war, but it's even worse when you fight and lose.
I had the pleasure of hearing him say that when he was here for the launch, and he repeated both those things you said. The best way to prevent war is to prepare for war, and the only thing more expensive than preparing for war is losing a war. Right. And that certainly makes a lot of sense. All right, well, let's open to all of you. Do we have the catch box out there somewhere? You wanna? We got a microphone. You wanna?
Just toss it to the next whenever you're done.
Okay, thank you very much, General, for being here and serving the country. I'd like to ask a little bit of background, and I appreciate the fact you've been in the field. But the Future Combat System was a wonderful opportunity. It was well presented by the Army. A lot of the community understood it very well. But then it was passed on to two contractors who were somewhat isolated from all the requirements, and they didn't have the relationship to the community that the Armed Future Command can have. I wonder if you'd like to comment on that, let's say, difference that represented.
Yeah, so I think one of the things you didn't mention on FCS, Future Combat System, is it lost ownership at senior Army levels. So it became, and the Army lost focus on it. And we stretched for technologies that were not yet available. So and the Army has...
That's that thing.
The Army has a bad history of planning programs around technologies in a certain maturation date for those technologies. And when those technologies don't mature like we would like them to, because you really can't plan it to a day, the entire program falls apart. And there's 5 or 6 programs in the last 20 years that kind of match that timeline. What the goggles, for instance, the things we're working on is the Army, in addition to Army Futures Command, also started a pilot last October called cross-functional teams. And these cross-functional teams, instead of requirements being written in a vacuum at Fort Benning or Fort Sill or wherever, involve a former colonel level commander, so brigade level commander, formation of anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 soldiers. It leads the team. It has a PM on the team. It has a test specialist on the team. It has a S&T specialist on the team. It has an RD&E specialist on the team. It has a coster on the team, and there's 2 or 3 others. And so it's completely informed before a requirements document is written, which the goal would be that we're not constantly changing requirements as we get it up there and understand that technology is not. And the other thing I would say directly to what you asked is the communication with industry has been terrible over the last 10 years. And it's really the leadership of the Army Secretary. So every Monday night, the Army Secretary, the Under, the Vice, and the Chief sit down with an industry partner, and they've been doing this over the course of the year. So that's 52 industry partners, and the cross-functional teams all have they've had the leash taken off of them, so they are constantly talking to not only the traditional defense suppliers. I mean, the company that's working with us on these Oakley glasses is not one of your traditional defense industry partners. And in many ways it happened because we got exposed to things we would not see by working with the traditional Big 5 defense contractors.
Thank you.
Sir, Chris Roy, Samurai Global. Like you, I'm a former leader in the Army, infantry, special operations. With the passing of the mission for countering weapons of mass destruction to SOCOM, and the point you made about soldier survivability. Do you see a direct connection with Army Futures Command and the work they're doing, especially given the uptick of, I mean, this isn't secret, the assassinations being carried out by near peers using WMD to protect our soldiers? Thank you, sir. Good luck.
Thank you. So in terms of the ability to operate in that type of environment, absolutely. I don't think that's, I mean, so the near-peer threats, and I keep saying near-peer threats. So the Army has been very, very focused on counterinsurgency operations for the last 16, 17 years. And a little bit of history. So I'm old enough, I remember being in the Army before the Berlin Wall came down, and we were very focused on a near-peer or even a peer threat. At that time, it was called the Soviet Union. And that's what all of our capabilities were developed against. That's what we trained against. I went to the National Training Center out of Fort Irwin, California on several occasions. You fought a surrogate Soviet force that used their doctrine. That's what the Army is getting back to. And so in that environment, the ability to operate in a CBRN environment will continue to be very critical because, I mean, that threat is there.
General, I'm very glad you're here. Personally, I'm happy because you remind me of two of the best years of my life serving as an advisor at the State Department on entrepreneurship. One of the things that happened while I was there was a lot of partnerships with a lot of other organizations, basically going out of the building and bringing folks into the State Department, one of which was with the Department of Defense. Mm-hmm. My takeaway from that was the real opportunity that we have here is to directly engage with citizen engineers and citizen scientists on these issues that you have that you need to get fixed. One of the things I heard you talk about a lot tonight is also a reminder of that time. And it wasn't very long when I was talking to my Defense Department friends on these collaborative projects we were working on, was we'd run into procurement issues very quickly. Mm-hmm. And I heard the letters OTA a lot. Do you feel that with what you've said while you're here tonight, do you feel that those issues have been mitigated to the point that they're not going to be an issue for these initiatives that will be coming through Futures Command? And if not, what do you think is left to do? And then I have a question about cyber because you haven't mentioned cyber.
Okay. So OTAs is one of the things that Congress has given us over the last 3 or 4 years. Another one is Section 804 authorities, which allows us to really openly compete for a prototype, and then if the decision is made to go from prototyping to some sort of production, you don't have to recompete it. You can select straight out of prototyping. But to be honest with you, all of the issues have not been resolved. And I've talked to Chairman Thornberry was down, a week or so ago. And he asked me, and I've been asked in testimony, I've been asked several office calls prior to my testimony about a month ago, what else does Congress need to do? And what I've told them is, I don't know yet. So let us try to work through around obstacles, and we'll come back to you when we find obstacles we can't get through. And I think that's the Army's commitment to Congress, and Congress has been committed to continuing to work with us to try to really, in my fundamental opinion, is it's a system that's going to be hard to fix because of all the baggage from the last 40 years. And I'm serious. Every time somebody makes a mistake, Congress will pass a new law, and it just makes it slower, more bureaucratic, and it's a zero risk mentality. So, and rightfully so in many cases, it's taxpayer dollars. So it's, I don't really worry about return on investment. I don't really worry about profit margins. I mean, it's a different mentality for me. I'm focused on providing the very best capability I can for our soldiers, but I do have a responsibility to the American taxpayer to not waste money as well. So is it completely fixed? I don't think so. I think we've made some progress the last 3 or 4 National Defense Authorization Acts, and I think Congress is committed to continuing to work with us to make it better.
I try to always look for acronyms to translate. So OTA for everybody?
Other transactional authority.
I hear that one a lot too. You want to?
Right.
Awesome.
And that's what, so, and I would also tell you that probably 7 or 8 times out of 10, the Army is its own worst enemy, that we don't fully understand the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, we don't
Thank you.
clearly understand the Department of Defense regulation that governs it, and there are ways of getting things done.
General, thank you again for being here and taking our questions. The OTA question actually was kind of a perfect segue into my question. So small companies like mine who don't have the benefit of having a military member on staff or a veteran on staff, someone who knows the lingo of the military, is it advantageous for us to seek those people out to have on before we make our connection with the military?
We're gonna try something, and it's called what? What are you calling that? Is that Halo or? Yeah, so Jay will talk about this more this week, but we're going to try to build that capability into Jay's organization, so you don't have to go out and find people to do that. That we will provide that help in terms of, you know, if it's the SBIRS, the small business program, and really almost equate it to, you know, you pull, well, so the way I equated it to people, because I'm familiar with it, is when I go to testify, somebody picks me up, somebody takes me to wherever I need to go in the Capitol, somebody gets me out of the car, somebody takes me to exactly the room I need to be, exactly when I need to be there, somebody escorts me into Congressman or Senator X's office, somebody gets me, as soon as it's over with, out of the office, back down that maze. You think the Pentagon's bad. The Capitol, back down the right stairs to a car that's waiting and takes me back to the Pentagon and drops me off and says, "Have a great day." I would like to replicate something like that in this organization for small businesses to help kind of get them through the process as quickly as we possibly can with as little pain as we possibly can.
Perfect, thank you.
You know, of all the things that I've heard about, that's been one of the most, I think, compelling. The idea of what an Army accelerator looks like is it looks a lot like that, where there's a bunch of resources to help you navigate through that process. And that can be a lot of different ways, but that I think it's a really smart approach.
Yeah, I think you just led right into the question I was going to ask. The
I'm gonna have to quit doing
program, I'm sorry?
I'm gonna have to quit doing that.
The SBIR program, the grant writing and this, that, and the other thing just seems to take forever. Are you going to be streamlining that? Can you help small businesses with that?
So that program currently belongs to RDCOM, Research Developing Engineering Command up at Aberdeen Proving Ground. So I have not dug into that piece of it yet, but this is the first time somebody's told me that, so the answer is now yes. We're going to dig into that, and because, you know, I can't change laws, I can't change statutes, but what I can do is streamline what we are doing, and so there's never really been a focus on moving fast, right? So it's avoid risk, and I love program managers, and I love program executive officers, but you know, if you're in a position for 2 years and you can kind of slow roll things for 2 years and then hand it off to somebody else, I mean, you really have no risk in that program. It's just the guy that finally delivers something that soldiers don't want, or it's obsolete when you deliver it, that bears the brunt of that. So how do we get investment? And I just did what I said that I got to quit doing is, this is not about the acquisition professionals versus the requirements guys versus the logistics guys versus the money guys. This is us. Right? This is a football team. We all have to work together to accomplish the goal of getting that ball in the end zone or getting capability delivered to our soldiers. And that's the cultural piece of it. But yeah, I mean, so Ross is probably taking notes. I will go look at the SBIRS program.
And for what it's worth, SBA has been paying attention to you coming here, and they are in the process of setting up an office here as well because they want to get engaged and try and help solve those problems too. Who's got the box?
Hi, good evening. Tammy Dunn.
Sí, Marta.
We're with Ocean Liang. We are intellectual property attorneys. And as we listen to this talk, which thank you so much, we're interested to hear what role you see private sector intellectual property attorneys playing in this process, particularly as you optimize on the commercial sector.
I have a basic aversion to lawyers, but
Me too. Me too. Me too. That's why I'm an intellectual property attorney.
Yeah, we're engineers.
so, you know, I think we get hung up on IP way too much. And so there's certain IP the Army will want. But in this space, I'm not sure, and I don't know how you go with an 80% or 70% or 60%. whatever the commercial market segment is, I don't know how, you know, you can demand from a small business that we want your IP and you're only going to sell to the Department of Defense. And I say there's certain IP we want, so like an aircraft engine. We want enough IP that we can fix it in our depots, but the company that builds engines for us really owns a majority of the IP. And so I don't think it's an all or nothing. I think it's case by case, and if the Army must have the IP, I think that there's, you know, negotiate, and if it works, it doesn't work. But I think in majority of the cases, we want enough IP that we can repair things ourselves, but beyond that, you know, really not interested.
Hi, I'm Annie Hardy. Again, we're all very excited to have you here. And a lot of us are very unfamiliar with military operations. We know technology, we know healthcare or industry, and that's where we came from. And we're excited for the application there within of what we know to what we don't know. But at the same time, how can we connect? How can we connect to what? All we need is the opportunity. We need to understand the green space, and we can build to that.
So that, I think I can help there too. So Josh mentioned this. So I got 9.5 years at Fort Hood. The senior enlisted soldier that I hired to come down here is coming from Fort Hood. The commander of Fort Hood has been a friend for 30 plus years. So what I'd really like to do is get soldiers down here in this space to kind of explain to you some of the issues they're dealing with. And I haven't talked to General Funk about this, but I think he'll be amenable. On occasion, load up a bus and take you to Fort Hood to work with units so you can see what soldiers are going through each and every day. Because, I mean, I can describe stuff to you all day long. You'll see things, and things will automatically pop in your mind that would never pop in my mind. So that's that's not in place yet. I've got a trip up to Fort Hood in a couple weeks. But that's one of the things I intend to talk to them about, is the ability to expose you to some of the problems soldiers are dealing with. And you'll be amazed, because you'll see stuff that's like, you know, we could fix that in 30 days.
You know, we actually have done one trip like that from Capital Factory up to Fort Hood a couple of years ago, and it was just as revealing as you said, and so we'd love to do more of those too. So we probably have time for one more question with the group here, and then I'm pretty sure General Murray said he's sleeping here tonight, and going to stay for as long as you all have questions. But
as long as
Craig
the bar's
Cummings?
open.
Thanks for tonight. Thanks both of you. So my question is, how do you envision partnering with the venture community in Austin and beyond?
So that's, you know, be honest with you, that's one thing that I have still struggled with. Because I've talked to, and we had some venture capitalists here. I talked to one last night at the hackathon. Got a trip coming here pretty quick out to California to talk some more venture capitalists, and I get really mixed stories. I got some VCs that will tell me that they're really not interested in the Army's capital. They're more interested in the Army as a customer, as opposed to a sidecar or investor. And I've had other VCs tell me just the opposite. And venture capitalists, just like hackathons, are completely new to everything I've ever done before. But one of the things that we're kind of exploring is, and if you're out there and you're a VC, please tell me if I'm wrong, is I see an opportunity for maybe the Army to be an early investor when there's a lot of technological risk, that we can buy down some of that technological risk. Not necessarily as the venture capitalist that takes it to full production or anything like that, but buy down, and not buy down the market risk, but buy down the technology risk, and get it to a point where a VC would be interested in taking that and accelerating that capability. I'm not settled on that, but I kind of see that after talking to a number of different people, is that may be a niche we'd be able to fill. And so the early risk takers, really.
We like that.
All right, so we're going to wrap here in just a second.
She said, please, please, please.
One more question. You got to do what the general says.
Three pleases gets it.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. I understand, I don't know if you said the number tonight, that you guys are going to invest a lot locally, and we're very excited about this. Somewhere in the
$50 billion a year. All in Austin. No, not all in Austin.
So, yeah, so we'll see.
So my question has to do with, okay, there's military tech and typical Army kind of stuff that you would think about, but are y'all also looking to use some of that to invest in any social science or research kind of stuff? Think de-escalation strategies, ways to work with communities, or green tech, or other things that are maybe beyond what maybe missiles and things like that?
So probably not as a majority. I mean, I'm not excluding that. So really the resources that, and the resources belong to the chief and the secretary. I think the 19 budget that just got approved was about 162 billion. Yeah.
B.
Now, not all that's S&T, RDT&E, procurement, but a pretty decent chunk. So about 60% of the Army's budget is pays for people. About 24% pays for readiness to training, and about 16%. So it's 36, 37, 38 billion probably out of that is what we're talking about that belongs to the chief and the secretary. But I've been given the responsibility of prioritizing and figuring out where that goes. So that's everything from basic and applied research to the equipment we buy. Not all that will be spent in Austin. Josh keeps saying, 162, but a lot of that's paying allowances. Some of that's spent in Austin. That's my pay.
That's coming, Austin.
And I promise I'll go to all the barbecue places and spend it. Or my wife will, because we're moving here shortly, and she's got to furnish a house now again. Address number 23. But I'm off track. So, the prioritization of how that gets spent, I've been tasked with, but ultimately it's the chief and the secretary's call. So I've also got responsibility to focus on what is most important to the Army. I'm not saying the type of things you're talking about are not important to the Army, because they are. But as a priority, we've got to focus on the biggest capability gaps we've got, and there's a lot of that going on right now, and there's no desire to cut back on that, the investment in those areas right now anyway.
If I may, one thing I've learned from dealing with the Army and with a lot of the big corporations around here is that big companies have all kinds of problems that they think of kind of often as very specific problems to them. Like when we started working with Mercedes, they're like, no, we're focused on mobility, transportation. But to them, everything is mobility. And like their billing system is mobility and transportation. Their customer service is mobility and transportation. The Army is the biggest corporation in the country with, I believe, 1.4 million employees. They got lots of problems.
1.1, yeah.
And so maybe, whether it's through Army Futures Command or not, just them being here, I think, is going to expose a lot of opportunities to work with them in a lot of different ways, too. So with that, I want to wrap with one more thing, and that is one of the things that I've had the pleasure of learning about through Army culture over the past couple years is a very special thing that I've received, which is what's called a challenge coin, which is a coin that many of the generals or others have that they can present. And we were so honored with that, and with all due respect to it, that we developed a Capital Factory coin. And due to certain acquisition rules, I don't think I was allowed to give you one before today. But I would like to present General Murray with one. This is our Capital Factory coin. If anybody has the red robot shirt on, that's the robot from the red. And on it, it says, the center of gravity for entrepreneurs in Texas, and then a saying that we also learned from many of the military coins we received, presented for excellence. And with that, I'd like to present that to you, General Murray.
You got the handshake down, too.
All right. And also, if you don't mind, because I know it's a lot of you, if you're a military veteran, would you mind standing up? And first, let's give them all a round of applause. Thank you for your service. I don't have 25 more coins, but please consider yourself virtually coined. It's like Bitcoin. We really thank you all for your service and appreciate you all being here. So thank you, General, and we'll wrap it up from here. There's the Startup Games party out there, or hang out here and talk with all the great people here, and thanks for coming. And breakfast, 8 a.m. breakfast in the morning is what? Bunker Labs, which all of you must know Bunker Labs, but obviously a great group here to support veteran entrepreneurs, 8 a.m. breakfast. Thank you, General.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. That was great. You want to say something?
Who's going to grab it?
Thanks, that was nice. On Ryan's camera. I think. Hey, how's it going, Chris?
How are you?
Great,
Good
great to see you.
Josh, Chris Roy.
Hey, Dave. I don't know what to do. I thought that was going to happen.
I knew that was going to happen.